Well, what is going on, everybody? Welcome everybody into the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Show on the Overreaction Sports Network. My name is Joe Miller. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Miller Wired, alongside my co-host for this episode, Jerry Ostrowski. You can find him on Twitter at Ostrowski_Big O. We are so excited that you guys are joining us right now here on YouTube Live and Facebook and Twitter, or X Live, whatever you want to call it. Please do us a favor, whatever platform you are consuming this podcast on. Please please subscribe, as Jerry said on Thursday night. Podcast drop on Friday. We are on a march to 1,000 over here at YouTube, trying to get to 1,000 subscribers so that we can bring some more additional better content to you, do some more better things. That's probably not the best way to say that, but it's super good to have all of you joining us right now, whether you are live again or in podcast form on Monday morning. But with that, Jerry O, how you feeling, Jerry O?
I just want to make sure that if I'm going to come on the air with co-hosts, that they have proper use of the English language. So you need to clean that up a little bit, Joe.
What are you making fun of me for stumbling over my words? Is that what you're saying?
I am. The use of Mo Betta was
Mo Betta.
was
I did not say Mo Betta.
It was suspect, Joe, and I really think that you need to brush up on that before we go on the air again.
Oh, you are a funny man.
I think we should probably tape the first 10 to 15 minutes off air and provide that as a subscription-only option, because I think that would probably be a pretty popular segment.
It'd be compelling, that's for sure. People would it'd be must-see TV. But I would imagine that everybody's live shows are probably like that, both before and off air, like before and after. As far like all the hot takes happen before the show starts and when the show ends. That's why John Fina, I've had this conversation with you in the past. John always wants to have a conversation about the show before the show, and I'm like, I don't want to do that because then my takes come out and then I don't bring them with the same energy.
That's an offensive lineman thing, Joe. That's being prepared to play every week. So that's and by the way, speaking of John's going to kind of be a ghost over the next week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. He's working his job, his kids are graduating college. He's on his way back from Tallahassee, where his daughter just graduated. So congratulations to Mimi. Congratulations to John, as she is now off the payroll, and you're not having to provide tuition and everything else. That
I wouldn't say she's off the payroll yet, but
you could be in my situation where you have kids that are still on the payroll. But yes, exactly, and you understand that as well. So congrats to Mimi, the Fina family, and one of these days, John, we'll see you back here on Overreaction Buffalo, and I hope real soon.
Hopefully for the first Off Tackle with John Fina show, at the very least. Welcome to the Off Tackle with John Fina show.
I'm gonna get a John Fina mask, and I'll study up on my big words and
welcome to the Off Tackle with John Fina show with my co-host Jerry Ostrowski.
Performing the role of John Fina today will be his understudy.
I almost grabbed my laptop and put a picture, like did the third picture in there, and it had just a static shot of him, and I figured we could ask him questions. Like, what do you think, John?
You have to have him like this. The picture has to be like this.
That's awesome. Well, welcome to everybody that is joining us, everybody in the comment and the chat section, as Jerry always likes to say. If you're watching us right now on X, Twitter, or Facebook, jump over to YouTube. The environment, the comment section, the community there is a little bit more fun. There's a lot more interaction back and forth going on. So jump in over there and join us. But welcome to everybody. We are going to have a conversation in this show around the wide receivers, a group that I have affectionately named at this point the Goonies. And the title of this episode is Goonies Never Say Die. I didn't feel like Misfits felt. I didn't feel like pick a phrase or a name of
like I said, from the Year Without a Santa Claus, the land of misfit toys, right? I mean, you can kind of throw that in there as well. I mean,
there's a lot going on in this wide receiver room. Not much of it looks super pretty. I know, Bills Mafia, we've talked about it on this show. A lot of you are wildly passionate about Khalil Shakir, and a lot of you are wildly passionate already about Curtis Samuel, and he's the Diggs replacement, and he can do all the things Stephon Diggs could do, and everybody's already wildly passionate about Keon Coleman. But the reality is, it's outside of probably 300 miles beyond the 716. Most people don't know who any of these people are, probably except the newest free agent signing, Chase Claypool. Most people around the NFL know who Chase Claypool is, but you would be hard pressed to find anybody in this wide receiver room that's a household name. Would you agree?
Oh, I agree. I mean, this is a situation where that room, you can't say they're complete no names, but there's a lot of guys that, you got Samuel and Hollins that have come in from other teams. You bring Coleman in on the draft. It's definitely in a state of flux, as my father used to always say. And yeah, I mean, it's something that's going to be a work in progress. I think there's a couple things that are going to be they're kind of I wouldn't say outliers, but they're kind of the determining factors of how this room is going to end up. And we're going to talk about that today on the show.
Yeah, and I kind of spoiler alert, I kind of gave it away already that the Buffalo Bills did sign Chase Claypool, who obviously was he made his name as a Steelers wide receiver and then ended up with the Dolphins last year. I feel like he was with somebody else and flaked out like of 2 teams last season. I don't remember.
He ended up on the Dolphins. Claypool, his first couple years in the league, had quite a bit of production. Very good player for the Steelers. Then I don't know, kind of became a malcontent, kind of a bad attitude guy. If you don't want to paint a pretty picture, and now he's trying to find a home. So he's in Buffalo, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So and just to kind of add wood to that fire, not fuel, but wood to the fire. I guess those are probably the same 2 things. The free agent signing before that one was Quintex Cephus, who was not in the NFL due to the fact that he had a gambling suspension for an entire season. And he wasn't anywhere near as productive as Chase Claypool was, but it begins to make you wonder, at least it makes me wonder as a fan, and as a season ticket holder, what is Brandon Beane doing? What is the front office trying to put together? Because they're not going out and necessarily signing OBJ. And the funny thing was the Miami Dolphins just signed OBJ. And I know people are varied on Odell Beckham Jr. and people are in different places. And I'm not one that feels like the Bills have to have him or that he's going to make this team like amazingly better either. The first report was the Miami Dolphins signed OBJ for $8 million. And I was like, oh, I'm out on $8 million. And then the real number showed up. It was like the Bills just signed OBJ for $3 million. And I'm like, huh.
Right.
3.
I look at OBJ kind of as your designated hitter in baseball, right? And when I say designated hitter, I don't necessarily mean a guy that bats for average. I mean a guy that he might, in 5 at bats, he might strike out 4 times, but the 5th at bat, he's hitting one 450 feet, right?
Right.
I don't think you're going to see him as a premier option in that offense, but I think he still has some home run ability. He has a chance by being the 2nd, 3rd wide receiver in that Dolphins offense to take advantage of maybe playing against a corner that's not the premier corner or getting a safety down on him or some one-on-one stuff where he can win a battle and make a big play. But I don't think this is the OBJ where you're going to go out and get 10, 12 catches, 250, 300 yards, those types of things. No. This is an option that makes them a little more dangerous, but yet, the governor is still on the golf cart, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. The Dolphins last year specifically had me wringing my fingers due to the fact that they had Tyreek Hill and obviously Jalen Waddle and Braxton Berrios. Braxton Berrios to me is one of those, just guys that can get under your skin and annoy you if you let him. And now they've got OBJ kind of potentially in that role that Braxton Berrios, and they still have Braxton Berrios on that football team. Anyway, all that to say this, when you look at our wide receiver room, and I'll go through these names, we've talked about them. We talked about them last week with Jay Skursky on the beat. Jay Skursky, Bills beat reporter from the Buffalo News. And then you and I are going to have a little bit of a dialogue conversation just about maybe potentially what the Bills are going to do with these guys, potential that they can do with these guys, maybe some things that you've seen in the NFL, you've seen teams do or in college, because you are far more versed in this than I am, obviously, as a fan. For the most part, I watch a lot of football, but I really only super pay attention to the Buffalo Bills. But looking at just the groups, and if you break them down in a depth chart format, it almost breaks down like hockey lines, right? So the first line, second line, third line of a hockey team. First line for the Buffalo Bills right now is Khalil Shakir, as we know, Keon Coleman, as we know, Curtis Samuel. And when I go through these guys, I think the thing that sticks out, and this is something you and I did text back and forth about 6 or 7 of these guys are slot receivers. And I know that you're going to address that, and I want you to, because in the NFL, there's a distinction behind a slot receiver for a reason. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Bills utilize these guys, because right now the only real boundary receiver is Keon Coleman coming from college, and potentially Justin Shorter, who a lot of people don't think is even going to make this football team. Anyway, line one, Shakir, Coleman, Samuel. Line two, they've got, from a depth standpoint, Chase Claypool, already slotted in. Mack, Hollins, Justin Shorter, then Andy Isabella, KJ Hamler, Quintex Cephus, and then fourth, Tyrell Shavers and Brian Thompson. Now, some of these guys are clearly going to be camp bodies, and we're only going to end up with probably 6 of these dudes, maybe 7 on the team, the active roster on Sundays. But even at a first blush, Jerry, I mean, what do you see this? What is your first strategic thought? Like, okay, this is what I'm going to do.
I think the biggest thing is what is Brady going to do when he utilizes his wide receiver talent?
Right, 100%.
I don't think we can really understand what's going to happen with this wide receiver group until we see what Brady's philosophy is going to be. I truly believe that he inherited Dorsey's playbook.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly last year. I think that he did some things, simplified some things. I think once he was hot in a certain area, he rode that until he needed to change up. When you look at most of the receptions or most of the targets by this receivers group, most of them were 0 to 10 yards in the middle of the field. So that does not necessarily mean that would happen because we are slot heavy. I think that was the theory behind what Dorsey was trying to do. When you look at our receiver group, and I utilize PFF and some things and just quickly looked at some stuff today. I don't think it's the be-all, end-all. I do think some of their evaluation is a little bit weird. But when you look at the PFF grades, Shakir ranks as the 29th receiver in the league. Samuel ranks as the 53rd after last season. And Hollins, his production puts him at 72. Just to give you a little bit of a comparison, Diggs, who's now with Houston, is ranked the 21st guy and the 3rd in the Houston wide receiver room. They've got 2 others above him, Dell and
Dell and
Crooks. Is that
Cooks.
his name?
Not Brandon Cooks is
not Brandon Cooks, but I think it's Crooks.
Gotcha.
Anyway, so he's 3rd in that room. I don't think we truly know. I think Shakir is a guy that can play inside and out. I think Samuel's a guy that can play inside and out. Shakir did have some success outside, as did Samuel. Hollins kind of predicts all over the place. Didn't have a ton of catches.
Nico Collins.
But he was Hollins was kind of all over the place. And then you look at our tight end room. I think it's hard to really put a grade on Dawson Knox, or not, because he was injured for quite a bit last year, was hampered by the wrist injury. You know that he is capable, does have some drop issues here and there. I don't know if that was because of the wrist or just he is that kind of receiver. He ranked 55th out of tight ends. Kincaid only ranked 20th. But if you look at Kincaid's production, a lot of his stuff was over the middle, but he did have some production outside as well. So I think that I don't like the fact that we try to pigeonhole these guys so much. Now, granted, there are receivers that deserve to be pigeonholed at one spot. We just took one at 33. If you look at Keon Coleman, he is an X. He is an outside guy. He doesn't seem to have the agility or lateral movement to play a slot. He did line up a little bit inside at Florida State. But when you get him moving east and west, he has some issues. So I guess you would say that he is the only true blue. And I guess you could throw Shorter in the mix as well if we're talking about everybody, as maybe that boundary X. But I'm not sold on the 1, 2, 3 thing, and I'm definitely not sold on this guy is an X, this guy. I think your receivers have to be able to play multiple spots, because in the NFL, the coverage is so good, you got to be able, by motion and alignment, to get guys freed up. So does that mean if they line up outside, they don't find their way back inside where a slot should be? I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you don't take a guy like Keon Coleman and line him up at slot where he eventually moves outside. I'm just saying these guys have to be able to move around and line up in different places and try to get themselves away from either better coverage or getting better one-on-one situations due to the defensive alignment.
It's interesting what you just said as far as like they've got to be able to play other positions. And I can tell you firsthand experience from my relationship with Isaiah Hodgins when Isaiah was here. Obviously the Dable playbook that Dorsey got, and then Joe Brady kind of probably has a little bit of. I mean, we don't know exactly how much he's going to change it or use it or utilize it or morph it or whatever. But to your point, he's probably got it right, because that's what Josh Allen is running. He's running the Dable. I said Dorsey, the Dable playbook. Isaiah Hodgins, when he was here, specifically his last training camp, he said literally to me, he said of the receivers that are on the squad right now, he said there's only 3 of us that know all of the position, like all the route trees for all 3 positions. He said me, Gabe, Steph. He said that's it. And literally, if anybody went to training camp that year, the last year that Isaiah Hodgins was on the team, he was the only wide receiver outside of Stephon Diggs that was going between all 3 positions. Like he was the only one in the second group, in the third group, where he was like filtering it out, even in the first group where he was playing all 3 positions. All the other wide receivers were kind of stuck to their roles besides Steph. Steph was doing the same thing. It's going to be interesting because this offense requires you to know at least one position really, really well. And because they're all choice routes and the way that everything happens at the line of scrimmage, which I know you can probably speak to that as well, it's very different and hard to know kind of all the routes, which kind of Keon Coleman's conversations as it pertains to some of his interviews with the Bills, when he said, I like to even know what the linemen are doing. So I like to know what they're going to be looking at, what they're going to be like, what they're facing, so that when I break off my route, I know if I need to wait, if I need to speed up, if I need to do something. So Keon provides me a level of expectation that he's going to have, probably not all of it, right? He's a rookie, but he's going to have a good amount of the playbook digested, so he knows kind of where to be inside of those like all 3 positions. But I think what's strange to me is we don't know what we're going to get necessarily from all of them. But outside of even the tight, I'm trying to figure out where I want to go with this. Even the tight ends. So you've got stand-up receivers in Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. They've both been successful outside in the boundaries. But when a tight end is not on a 3-point stance, they're pretty much a slot receiver at that point, are they not?
Yes and no. And I'm going to address your question this way. And one of the things I want to preface this by when I start this thing is this. We talk about offensive linemen being versatile, right?
Mm-hmm.
An offensive lineman can, I want a guy that can play center guard and tackle. Right. Well, all the plays are different for each position. Right. All the techniques are different for each position.
And right to left, right? And right to left.
And right to left. Okay. So offensive lineman can do it. Okay. And then we talk about Dalton Kincaid last year when we draft him. There was a lot of pundits out there, a lot of people talking about this pick saying, well, hell, man, when he shows up, he's going to be our best slot receiver. Mm-hmm. Okay, but he can put his hand on the ground at the end of the line of scrimmage, or he can flex off the line of scrimmage, or he can line up in a true slot, and that's okay. We expect him to do that. But yet all of a sudden, wide receivers have to be an X. They have to be a Z.
Right.
They have to be and so that's where I have that problem. And to kind of go back to what you said earlier, Joe, a little bit about the route tree. A route tree is a route tree. A hitch is a hitch. A go is a go. A post is a post. A flag is a flag. Okay.
It's more the predetermination before the snap.
These are all the same things. Okay. Yeah. The difference is, and I think this is where I don't know until I'm in the huddle in 7-on-7 and I listen to how Joe Brady and what his nomenclature is. Right. I'm going to give you two examples. One example is the old school, like we used to do, long-winded play. So it would be, for instance, 83, X go, Z cross, Y banana. Okay. Well, I just told the X what to do. I just told the Z what to do. And I just told the Y what to do.
Right.
Okay. So I would think that a wide receiver can line up at X, and if he tells him X cross, he knows he's running across.
Right, got it.
If he lines up at or if he lines up at Z, he runs across. If he lines up at X, he runs a go. Right. So there's that, and then there's also these guys. They run up and they say, they'll say left six, Florida, and that's it. And when you hear that, the receivers know that when it's left six Florida, okay, and if Florida means your strength is to the right and your X is to the right, in Florida, the X always runs a hitch. The Y always runs a seam. The H, if there is an H, does this, or the Z always runs a go. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So and when I say that, it means the first receiver runs this, the second receiver runs this. So you have to know, if I'm going across the formation and I'm the X this time, when I say left 6 Florida, that I know if I'm at X, I'm going to run a go. But then if they tell me to go in at Z, I have to know what the number 4 receiver runs in Florida.
Right.
So that then muddies it a little bit. And then you can also tag off of that. So if you say you run Florida, like I just talked about, left 6 Florida, and X is running a go, and the Y is running a seam, okay, or the X is running the hitch and the Y is running the seam, I can say left 6 Florida, Y out. And now I'm taking the Y and I'm saying, you're not going to run the seam, you're going to run it out. Gotcha. So there are ways to do that. So I don't know what Brady's nomenclature is. I don't know what it's going to be. But when you get to the meeting room at 8 a.m. and you don't leave till 6 p.m, and I'm getting paid 6 figures or more, or 7 figures to play these positions, we should be able to learn them. Now, granted, when Keon Coleman comes in, I'm not going to put all that on him. I'm going to get him to learn X first, and then I should be able to move from there. So I just think that we have to be a little more open-minded in how we look at the wide receiver room and understand that it's okay to be versatile in every other position. I'll ask Groot to go into the 3 technique on pass rush down, so I get a mismatch with him rushing over a guard.
Right.
Yet I can't ask my receiver to go from slot or go from an H to an X or whatever. It just, I think that we have to be a little more not so regimented that this guy has to play here and this guy has to play here. These are pro receivers. They can do a lot of stuff.
You use the word regimented. It makes me wonder, to your 2 examples, because I know that the complexity of the offense right now is based on being on the same page with Josh. I'm seeing what he's seeing. So what the leverages give me. So they got the play call, what the leverages give me where I'm being played. And then I've got the option of these routes or this route or blah, 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 blah. It makes you wonder if they are going to maybe have to, or can they, I'm going to use, this is a horrible phrase, dumb it down a bit, right? Maybe not make it the most complex offensive scheme in the NFL, which it's been said the Bills have the most complex offensive scheme, which you got to think the Giants probably have a similar one, right? Because Dable's there. Right. But you got to wonder if they're going to pull it back a little bit, right?
Yeah, I can see that. But also when I look at guys, I mean, Shakir going on year number 3, he should know what's going on. Samuel, I think going on year number 8, possibly. He should know what's going on. Mack Hollins has been in the league 6-7 years. He should know what's going on. Knox, obviously. So I think they've got some guys, and I keep glossing over Claypool. I actually think the Claypool signing made a whole hell of a lot of sense.
Go on.
And here's why. I look at the locker room and the organization of Buffalo, and I look at how it's constructed, and I look at what they really, really take pride in. And kind of, if you look at why Diggs was moved on, there was a lot of, the bickering and issues with him that led to that. When you look at his production over last year after the first 5 games, are we going to spend all this money on a guy that, is rated where he is? I think that Buffalo is a good option for Claypool. I think it's an organization that can put its arms around him, maybe get him to see what's important and what's not important, get him out of his recent funk as far as just, I keep going back to the term malcontent. I mean, I think that, and that's no other way to put it, right? I mean, he's had a bad attitude. Right. Is the way you want to look at it. His body language has been poor. His attitude's been poor.
He was a quality player, but
he was a quality player, and for whatever reason decided that he wasn't being utilized. And now maybe he looks back on things and says, you know what, I screwed this up. And I'm going to an organization that is solid, that has a bunch of good, solid dudes in that locker room that can take him in. And, I think of all the reclamation projects in the league and all the guys that you look at that maybe have a chance to be the feel-good comeback player story of the year, this is that situation. But the Bills and the locker room and the leadership and the admin, that's only 50% of the equation. The other 50% is him, and he's got to be willing to do it. But I think that was a no risk signing by the Bills. If he doesn't comply, then you move him on and you go about your business.
Yeah, what's interesting, as you were talking, I was just kind of going through the players and still kind of am. The one big difference this year that Joe Brady luxury, if you will, that Joe Brady's going to have that, Brian Daboll never had, and specifically Brian Daboll never had, and Ken Dorsey didn't have, is, when you look back at Sean McDermott affectionately calling his wide receiver group the Smurfs because they were all so short. Keon Coleman is 6'2", 6'3". Chase Claypool is 6'4". I think Mack Hollins is 6'4". Like, he's got some size in that room. Quintex Cephus is he's 6'1". So there's this wide receiver room is going to look very different than it's ever looked before. Then you've got 6'5" guys on, in your two tight ends as well. And the one thing that we really didn't touch on, and I don't know that we've got time now, but we probably should spend some time at some point talking about this concept, this idea, maybe on another show this week or next week, that, several people have said it, that, the Bills are probably going to run the ball more.
Right.
And it's just like, really? Because they weren't great necessarily at running the ball last year. I don't know that that's necessarily, for me, where you want to be with a quarterback like Josh Allen. And by the way, your head coach and your GM said we need to be more explosive. So to me,
you can be explosive in the running game, Joe. That doesn't necessarily mean you got to be. It's got to be all passing.
You definitely can if you've got Jonathan Taylor, your running back.
Right. I mean, but when you look at this, and I'll tell you what, I think I told you the other day when we had our show, I think people are sleeping on Davis. I think Davis is a guy that was a product of the team that he was on. Meaning, Kentucky did not have much. He did not have much help. And I think he has the opportunity to be a really, really good pro. And I think a very good compliment to Cook.
Yeah.
But, I think the biggest thing with this Bills receiving situation, Joe, when you look at it, is there's a couple factors. And we'll get into Keon Coleman and what I think about him and how he fits in this whole thing. But I think when you look at this group, and you look at this offense in general, we talked about the one factor, which was Brady. We don't know what Brady's going to really do yet. I mean, is this offense going to look completely different than it did last year? I really think it has an opportunity too.
Yeah.
I think that he's really going to change some things. The other aspect is Josh Allen. You've got to run a scheme and run a system that's comfortable for Josh.
Yes.
And when you looked at this last deal, most of the receptions over the middle in that 0 to 10 or 10 to 15 or 10 to 20 yard range, is that where he likes to be? I think maybe his first reads, that's where he likes to be. And then, of course, he does so much with his feet. We don't know. But I think those are the two biggest aspects. I mean, is Brady and then Josh Allen and how he kind of his input kind of molds what Brady wants to do, because as well as I do that's the difference maker. That's the guy, right?
Yep,
I mean, we still have him.
I'm gonna let you get into your Keon Coleman thing. Before I want to just correct myself. So looking at this wide receiver room and doing something different, and I talked about the bigger wide receivers. So Keon Coleman is 6'4". Chase Claypool is 6'4". Mack Hollins is 6'4". Justin Shorter is 6'4". So this is and then you've got Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid who are in the 6'4", 6'5" range. All of a sudden, you got a bunch of trees out there, which is versus little tiny short fast guys. Oh, and by the way, the Bills still have two of those guys, three of them with Isabella. So it'll be interesting to see what they're going to make of it, how they're going to make of it. But talk real quick, if you can, in the last couple, we got a couple minutes left, just as far as just that Keon Coleman and how you see him fitting. I like this.
I think the wide receiver room is going through a transition. And when I say that, I think they've got a little bit of something to them. And I think that Keon Coleman has a opportunity to kind of be that guy that brings it with him. I mean, we've all seen him in the press conferences. We all seen how lighthearted he is. The thing about Keon Coleman I love, he competes. Okay. I've read some things about him. I've seen some different things. He's referred to, and PFF referred to him as an alpha receiver. And they mean by alpha is he's a guy that's going to compete for every catch, contested catches. He's going to go up and make catches. And what's funny is, and if you see enough about this, alpha type receivers, the ones that hit end up being really, really good.
Right.
And the ones that don't hit usually flame out pretty quick.
Right.
So we're going to kind of see his development, right in front of our eyes. He's, like we say, he's still 20 years old, going to be 21 soon, physically gifted. He does have issues with separation. I mean, that seems to be the new I don't want to say catchphrase, but the new thing that makes us want to pick a guy and not pick a guy.
Right.
And we talked about him being compared to Worthy. Worthy ran the fastest time ever in the history of the combine at 175 pounds. And you know what? If you looked at his grades and everything, Kansas City reached at that spot to take him.
Oh yeah, for sure.
They reached to take him. So his comparisons will always be with him, and that's fine.
Yep.
But I look at his attitude. I think Curtis Samuel has some dog to him.
Yeah.
Shakir has kind of shown that he's got a little bit of an edge to him.
Agreed.
So that room went from being, hey, look at the guy in the corner complaining every day, to dudes walking in that got some little bit of something in their neck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing that excites me about this Bills youth movement, is the guys they are bringing in are guys that have a little bit of something in their neck. They want to compete. They want to, have a little bit of attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing I really, really like about this. And, that's probably, obviously his physical traits are amazing, but that's the one thing of look at the pluses, the pros and cons of Keon Coleman. The thing I really love about him is he competes, and he's got a little something to him. And that attitude has a chance to be infectious in that room. And now all of a sudden, just because of levity and all of this, that changes how that room competes, and that changes how they are on the field with production.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see how all this plays out and shakes out. Obviously there's 11 guys on the roster right now in that wide receiver spot, in that wide receiver room. We expect no more than 6 potentially to make this team. Who the 6 are going to be, and then who will be carried on the practice squad, it all remains to be seen. Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
And I will say this, I think the Claypool has a ton of dog in him. The problem is sometimes the dog that shows up is the wrong dog, right?
Right.
It's the one that's laying on the porch all day, not the one that's running off the porch, right?
Yeah.
So if this group can then bring him along, he has an attitude change. There's another guy, because his first couple years at Pittsburgh, he had that in him.
Yeah.
And then whatever happened, and you go from there. But
well, I think they drafted a new quarterback, and they drafted a new number 1 dog. Right. So, I mean,
it is a little different. Ben Roethlisberger is throwing you the football. That's a great point.
Right. And that's the one thing that the Steelers have always done well. And obviously Mike Tomlin is a former wide receiver, I believe, in college.
DB.
Was he DB?
We went through this before.
Gotcha.
Him and McDermott were both DBs at William & Mary.
Yeah, he just whatever it is, he knows how to draft wide receivers. Like the guys he picks, they hit, and then when they leave them, they don't. But he does such a good job at drafting wide receivers. But any final thoughts before I get us out of here? So I guess going forward, so Tuesday we've got Dan Fates from Rochester, Bills beat reporter, that's going to be joining us for On the Beat. Thursday, obviously we have another show, Overreaction Show. And then I'm trying to think, week after next on the beat is Vic Carucci, right? Vic Carucci's going to be here week after next.
Sounds like it might be me and Vic reliving old times.
Yeah, you and Vic.
I'm fired up about that.
And possibly Fina as well. So I will be traveling that day, so I won't be here with Vic, you guys and Vic, unfortunately. But anything else that I'm missing as far as just announcements or anything we got to talk about real quick?
No, I do think that as we move in the off season, we need to figure out when we're going to let everybody in on what we're going to do during the season, because we're pretty much 90% there what we're going to do, and we got some different ideas. But no, I mean, obviously we're moving into the summer months, into the doldrums of the NFL. Stick with us, folks. I mean, you're going to get we're going to come at you with a bunch of stuff that's intriguing and things that'll make you think a little bit, which is what we always want to do, not only inform but also make you want to think, or irritate you to the point that you want to pick a fight with me on X. That's fine as well. We're always here for that.
Indeed.
Although my mom used to say that you don't have to fight all the fights that you're invited to, but
it's fair.
We're looking forward to it. But I think this wide receiver room, Goonies. I love the Goonies. One of my favorite movies. I can relate to Chunk. That's okay. And of course, Joe glosses himself as the cool character right off the bat. I'm so.
I said I was Brand because I was waiting for you to be like, oh, you're
On brand. On brand. On brand.
Anyway,
and we all know John is Mrs. Fratelli. Mama Fratelli.
Mama Fratelli. Or the good-looking son. She had 2 sons, right? One was really, really good-looking. That liked to sing just like John does. So he's probably the oldest son, the oldest Fratelli boy. So the Bills are entering phase 2 of their OTAs starting on Monday. I think they've got 2 weeks of that, and then I think the rookie mini camp is coming up, and then obviously mini camp is coming up. There's all kinds of good stuff coming up, so we're gonna have things to talk about as far as that goes. But yes, we will be paying a lot of attention to the Goonies throughout this process, all the way leading into training camp. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Show on the Overreaction Sports Network. For myself, for Jerry Ostrowski, for John Fina, it has been so good having you guys. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.